For more than 2,000 years, we dismissed Atlantis as a fairy tale, a philosopher's fantasy. Then, archaeologists dug through deep layers of volcanic ash and found a city that seemed to echo Plato's story. 3-story buildings, indoor plumbing, frescoes so vivid they could have been painted yesterday. Around 1600 BC, in the middle of the Aegean Sea, an entire island exploded. Not erupted, exploded. One of the largest eruptions of the last several thousand years. Its column punched deep into the stratosphere, and when the sky finally cleared, Europe's first great civilization had already begun to die. This is the story of the volcano that ended a world and may have given birth to the legend of Atlantis. Before the eruption, Minoan influence stretched across the southern Aegean, Europe's first advanced civilization. They built multi-story palaces, engineered paved roads and drains, and traded from Egypt to Spain. Their cities had no walls. Their ships were their walls, carrying Minoan power across the Aegean. But the one enemy they could not fight was not human. It was a mountain in the middle of the sea. Later Greeks would call it Kaliste, the most beautiful. Rich soil, natural harbors, a jewel of the Aegean. Generations were born and buried on its slopes. The mountain had always been there, always quiet. Kaliste was not a mountain. It was a time bomb, and the timer was near zero. Beneath the island, magma had been gathering through chambers and fractures, feeding pressure into the rock above. The first warning was an earthquake. Buildings shook, plaster cracked, dishes fell from the shelves. The Minoans had felt earthquakes before. They swept up the dust, repaired their walls, and stayed. Then the mountain itself began to speak. Steam from the peak, and a low rumble that never quite stopped. We know what happened next because of what archaeologists did not find. No bodies, no signs of panic, no overturned furniture, no scattered jewelry. The evidence suggests Akrotiri was evacuated in remarkably good order. They carried away much of what they valued, but not everything. One golden ibex remained, hidden in a clay chest. Whatever they saw in those final days, it convinced an entire community to abandon their paradise. They escaped the island. Whether they escaped the catastrophe is another question. What came next was not one disaster. It was a chain of them, so violent that geologists struggled to reconstruct it. First came a column of ash and pumice that rose more than 30 kilometers deep into the stratosphere. The sun vanished. Day became night, and the ash began to fall. At Akrotiri itself, pumice stones as large as tennis balls rained down for hours, and then for days. In parts of the city, each square meter carried nearly 200 kilograms of volcanic debris. Layer by layer, Akrotiri was buried. 3 stories became 2, 2 became 1, then nothing at all. But the ash and the pumice were only the beginning. As enormous volumes of magma were expelled, the island's center lost its support and collapsed into the sea. Avalanches of superheated ash and rock plunged into the sea. The volcano's flanks gave way. The ocean was displaced. Tsunamis spread outward across the Aegean, striking islands and coastlines hundreds of kilometers away. Along the coast of Crete, the waves flooded settlements, wrecked harbors, and tore through low-lying farmland. Harbors and warehouses were swept away in minutes. Ships were torn from their moorings and carried far inland. The fleet that had protected Minoan trade and power for generations was shattered in a single morning. On Crete, 100 kilometers south, communities faced a world they no longer recognized. The wave had damaged their fleet and harbors. Now ash, broken trade, and failed harvests threatened the rest. In exposed regions, ash smothered fields and water supplies. Elsewhere, broken trade deepened the crisis. And high in the stratosphere, volcanic aerosols began to spread far beyond the Aegean world. In the years that followed, evidence suggests colder summers and failed rains in some regions, and growing hunger. Then, more than 700 kilometers away, Egypt recorded something it struggled to explain. The Tempest Stele of Pharaoh Ahmose describes darkness, violent rain, and temples damaged across the land. Some scholars once linked this storm to Thera, but newer dating places the eruption before Ahmose's reign. On Crete, the Minoans clung on for generations. They rebuilt palaces, replanted fields, raised new ships. Much of the old wealth was gone. The fleet was weakened, and the sea no longer belonged to them alone. Minoan power survived for generations, but over the next century and a half, the balance of the Aegean shifted. The eruption did not conquer Crete, but it may have opened the door for someone else who could. Around 1450 BC, Mycenaean power reached Crete, and the old order began to give way. Many of Crete's palace centers were destroyed or abandoned. Knossos endured longer, under growing Mycenaean rule. The Minoan script, Linear A, fell silent. 36 centuries later, it remains undeciphered. The independent Minoan world was gone, surviving in ruins, borrowed symbols, and fragments of Greek myth. The closer researchers look, the less it resembles one clean catastrophe, and the more an entire age unraveling. But on Thera itself, deep beneath the ash, the volcano had perfectly preserved what it had destroyed. In 1967, a Greek archaeologist began digging at a site on Santorini called Akrotiri. Spiridon Marinatos hoped to test his theory, that the eruption had helped devastate Minoan Crete. He found far more. Before long, his trench opened into the upper floor of a building sealed for 3.5 millennia. Akrotiri was not a village. It was a city. 3-story houses, paved streets, covered stone drains. Some homes had indoor toilets linked to covered drains. Extraordinary urban engineering for Bronze Age Europe. And on the walls, the ash had sealed something priceless. Frescoes with their colors still alive. Boys boxing, fleets sailing between painted cities, women gathering saffron, blue monkeys at play. The monkeys tell their own story. Species most scholars trace to Africa, a clue to networks reaching the Nile. Yet one subject is strikingly rare in Akrotiri's surviving art: warfare. No battle scenes, No marching armies. Its art celebrates ships, animals, ritual, and nature. A very different face of power from the warrior kingdoms to come. The ash preserved one final witness. In 2006, scientists found an olive branch buried alive. Researchers treated its growth pattern like a clock, a damaged one, useful but difficult to read. Radiocarbon points to the late 17th or 16th century BC. The exact decade is still fiercely debated. A city without bodies, art with almost no war, a tree killed in the eruption itself. The picture was almost complete, except for one pattern that writers and some researchers kept returning to. It all sounded strangely familiar. More than 1,000 years later, the philosopher Plato wrote down a story he presented as ancient history. A mighty sea power, its capital built in concentric rings, destroyed by the gods in a day and a night. He called it Atlantis, and he said the tale had been handed down to him from a far older source. Plato said the story came from Solon, who heard it from Egyptian priests, keepers of records older than Greece. Egypt preserved records and traditions far older than Plato, archives where distant catastrophes might endure. Plato dated Atlantis 9,000 years before his own time. Far too early, impossibly early for Thera. One theory holds the numbers changed in transmission, and 900 years lands near the eruption window. And the parallels are hard to ignore. Concentric harbors, maritime power, a rich island world broken by the sea, an island shattered by catastrophe, and a maritime civilization that slowly passed into legend. Most scholars remain cautious. Plato was a philosopher, not a historian, and Atlantis served his moral lessons. Even without a proven link, Thera remains one of the most compelling real events proposed as an influence on the legend. Thera may not have been Atlantis, but it may have helped create the memory from which Atlantis was born. Stand on the cliffs of Santorini today, and you are standing on the rim of the story itself. One mystery remains, the oldest of all. The people of Akrotiri escaped their island, but to where? No mass grave has ever been found. No archive records their arrival. An evacuated community folded into silence. One possible destination was Egypt. At Avaris, archaeologists uncovered frescoes in a strikingly Minoan style. Aegean artists, deep inside Egypt, refugees, envoys, or hired masters. No one knows who they truly were. Others may have reached Crete, only to be swallowed by the same slow decline that took the Minoan world. For decades, that was where the trail went cold. Then, genetics reopened the case. In 2017, researchers sequenced DNA from Minoan bones and compared it to people living today. The genomes revealed substantial continuity from Bronze Age Minoans into later Aegean populations, Crete included. The political world disappeared. Its people did not vanish. Their ancestry still lives along the same Aegean shores. And the volcano? The volcano is still there too. Santorini last erupted in 1950. Today, instruments track tremors and ground shifts from magma moving below. In early 2025, Researchers mapped some 25,000 quakes between Santorini and Colombo. A state of emergency. Schools closed. Thousands leaving by ferry. For a few weeks, the world remembered Thera. Later studies reconstructed the cause. A sheet of magma forcing its way sideways through fractures in the crust. By one estimate, enough magma to fill more than 100,000 Olympic pools. It never surfaced. This time. The swarm faded. The tourists returned. But beneath the postcard sunsets, the system stays active and closely watched. And beneath the modern excavation, most of Akrotiri still waits in the dark. Street after buried street. An entire chapter of human history, preserved by the very hand that erased it. If you want more of history's vanished worlds and the disasters that erased them, subscribe to Echoes of Antiquity. The past is never really past. It is only buried, waiting for someone to dig.